Red Bull dominated F1 in last year with 21 out of 22 races being won by the team and finishing most races well ahead of its competitors. With the start of the season indicating that recent history would be repeating itself, it came as a shock to many that Red Bull was not only losing the race win, but also has had major difficulties even getting into the podium places with all teams catching up in terms of pace. McLaren have even managed to take the lead in the Constructors Championship this year. Verstappen gave an interview in Singapore about Red Bull's struggles this season and how they hope to turn the poor form around with subtle upgrades and by gaining a better understanding of the car in general as we head to the final quarter of the 2024 season. The Dutchman achieved his worst season finish in Monza, where he only managed to cross the line in 6th and has dubbed it as a low point in the 2024 season. The Baku Grand Prix was the start of a turnaround after Red Bull has had to take a hard look at the car and change some major components of the car. Verstappen has stated in an interview that from the start of the 2024 season, something has felt off about the balance of the car. The front and the rear didn't seem to connect. This was, however, hidden by the sheer amount of extra performance they still had over the other teams. But now that McLaren, Ferrari, and Mercedes have all taken multiple victories this season, it's clear that something needed to change. Here's Verstappen's take on the issue. We went wrong somewhere in the development of the car. When the team arrived in Baku, they had brought an upgrade with small changes to the floor. The pace of the RB20 seemed very good, and with Perez running in 3rd for the big part of the race ahead of his crash, it was clear that Red Bull had regained some pace following their mid-season struggles. When talking about identifying the source of the issue, it's always important to look at what means the teams have at their disposal. In the case of Red Bull, it's a very old wind tunnel that is often referred to as a Cold War relic. When Verstappen was asked about it, he mentioned, "We have a fairly old wind tunnel, but until now, it has always worked right. It's just very difficult to understand the data under the current regulations. All teams have had their own problems, including teams with modern wind tunnels. I think it is just extremely difficult to fine-tune things perfectly, or to get exactly the right data out of it. That can be down to a lot of things in the wind tunnel itself, or how it correlates with the track." He added, all the other teams have the same issues except for McLaren, who are still holding back on a new floor upgrade, which they're not completely sure about. The cars are a lot more sensitive to upgrades than they were under previous regulations. Now that they have added some subtle changes to the floor since Baku, both Red Bull drivers seem way happier with the balance of the car, and Verstappen even managed to finish on the podium in P2 in Singapore. However, this fix may be too little, too late. Despite fixing some of the issues the RB20 was facing, the Red Bulls were once again well behind McLaren's pace at the Singapore GP. The Marina Bay Street Circuit saw Lando Norris completely dominate Verstappen on pure race pace. The British driver finished over 20 seconds ahead of Verstappen. Last year, if you had predicted that any of the F1 drivers would finish 20 seconds ahead of Max Verstappen, you would have been laughed out of the room. But today, that is the reality. While Red Bull may have fixed a minor issue with the Azerbaijan upgrade, they still have a long way to go. For the next race in Austin, Red Bull will be bringing some major upgrades to their cars. The team and Verstappen will be hoping that these upgrades puts the RB20 back in the fight for race wins against McLaren. Otherwise, Red Bull will be in huge trouble. Not only do they risk losing both championships this year, but it'll be very hard for them to stay ahead of the field next year. Given that there are not much changes to the regulations in 2025, McLaren could continue winning races in 2025. This time, both their drivers will be able to finish ahead of the Red Bull drivers, unless the Austrian outfit is able to fix their issues with the RB20. With more upgrades coming in Austin next week, Verstappen is confident that Red Bull's struggles are over, and is hopeful that with the upcoming upgrades, they'll be able to start closing the gap to McLaren in the final races of the 2024 season. This will be very important for Max, as he is currently at risk of losing the Drivers' Championship as well. With just 6 more races to go this season, Lando is 52 points behind the Dutch driver. But if Lando continues to win race after race, he could be the next Formula One champion. Do you think Red Bull's upgrades in Austin will help Max Verstappen to stay ahead in the Drivers' Championship? Post your thoughts in the comment section below.